Hi everybody, we're going to get started. I'm Maddie Probst. I'm the managing producer here at Watershed for a range of programs relating to BFI. And I'm really grateful that you've come in person to this event, and I hope we can have a really rich set of discussions, and we can leave you feeling inspired, informed, and producing some great events across the UK around Powell and Pressburger. We're also grateful to our online audience for joining us remotely. Hello, everybody. I hope you can get something out of it. And also for those that are joining remotely, obviously feel free to use the Zoom to ask questions, the Zoom chat, but we can also pick up in your individual Film Hub meetups if you've got further questions. I'll just say a tiny little bit about cross-fan programming, just to give you a sense of how things have changed for those of you that have worked on those kind of programs before. We decided to put on a sprint because we felt it was important to bring people together from different regions and get you sort of having an opportunity to meet some of the fantastic curators that are involved in shaping the season from BFI side. But I just wanted to flag that in terms of then fleshing out some of those ideas and applying for the funds, you are going to your regional hubs, which is a new thing. So hopefully you're familiar with the teams in your regional hubs, and they will be able to provide follow-up information and support you on the journey before that deadline. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So in terms of this space, there's a toilet as you just come out of the cinema on the right, or you can go all the way down to the corridor and go to our beautiful new gender-neutral toilet. And if there's a fire alarm, just follow the staff. They'll show you where to go and go to the fountains outside. And that's about it. The lunch will be provided. And I'm going to hand over to Ty, who's going to just say a little bit more about how today's going to roll. Ty.
Hey everyone, I hope you can hear me online. I saw your comments that it's a bit low, so I'm just going to project, and hopefully that'll be okay. So before I hand over to the programming team and the curating team at BFI, I just wanted to run through a few key dates. So what we're going to do for the main session is I'm just going to ramble for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to hand over to Robin and Rydian and Claire from the BFI that will tell you about the restorations and plans. I'm mainly going to go through the creative brief, and here you go, show you the key dates for what we've got planned for the season. So calls have already opened. You can apply to your regional hub for the various plans that we have funding available to. So there is a touring menu available of Powell and Pressburger titles. The Red Shoes, which is under having a new restoration celebrating an anniversary this year. We also have A Matter of Life and Death, I Know Where I'm Going, Black Narcissus. There's one more. It's not one more. I thought it was 5, it's 4. From that's the menu, so it's very easy to apply to do that, and then you can get £125 to do any activity around that, such as guest speakers, marketing outreach. Then we also have bespoke and cross-fan proposals. So if you wanted to put on a more elaborate program around Powell and Pressburger, you submit your plans to your film hub, and that can be anything from just doing the films of Michael Powell or films that were inspired by the works of Powell and Pressburger. Anything from Pixar's Soul to La La Land to allegedly the new Barbie movie, but that's under interpretation. So the deadline for that is the end of the month, Friday the 30th of June. Your local film hub will then make the decisions and get back to you. We've also later, after Robin and Rydian, we've got a talk from Pamela Hutchinson, who's going to be zooming in from Iowa, I believe, who's just written a new book all about the Red Shoes. It will hopefully give you some inspiring ideas. And then that will be the end of the online session. But this will all be recorded and put online. And then we also have Claire from the BFI. I've forgotten what the title, the curation Special Collections, who is also doing a special collection on the Red Shoes. So there's going to be a lot of activity around that film as it celebrates its major anniversary this year. So without further ado, I'm just going to pass you over to Robin and Ridian, who will take you through the key aspects of the Powell and Pressburger season. So gentlemen, come on up and I'll put your slides up for you.
One thing I wanted to say is we do want the day to be interactive. So once, the presentations happen, please ask questions if you're not sure about things. We will also be sharing a list of longer films, which will be shared in a paper version today, but will be followed up in an electronic version for our friends that are online once we've sort of finalized that. If you have ideas that are UK-wide, so they go beyond your region, Ty and I and Ridian will be good points of contact for you to have a chat with us about what you're planning. But we'll pick that up in the afternoon in the workshop. Great. Robin.
Hello, everybody. My name's Robin Baker. I'm head curator of the BFI National Archive, and I've been working with the team who've been working on this project, I have to say, for a very long time. And the reason it's been taken many years in the making is the amount of film restoration, research into the materials, creation of new materials, films that haven't even been seen for decades. So it's fantastic we're finally at this point where we're going to start working together on a project. But I should say as well, this presentation doesn't yet show the beautiful new artwork that's being developed. So that is not the artwork for the project, but I think Ridian's got a big reveal for us later on about what it does look like. Our starting point with this really was thinking, when you think of who are the greatest filmmakers in the story of British film, filmmakers working in this country, that you could tell a story about, at some scale, and where all the stories haven't already been told, who are they? There are not that many you can tell that story with in British film. Yet Powell and Pressburger, I can think of no more filmmakers British filmmakers who've been more influential. And what I found so interesting with last year's Sight and Sound poll of the greatest films ever made was there were two Powell and Pressburger titles in the top 100, which for British filmmakers is kind of extraordinary. Looking at who voted for them, mainly international filmmakers, but then realizing because they made so many masterpieces, the vote was always split. So then you go into the top 250 and you see all these other Powell and Pressburger titles. And then thinking about, well, here are these filmmakers that maybe to some of us feel familiar, maybe not. To the general public, not so much. There was a job of work to kind of sing and shout and champion, not just our greatest filmmakers, but I think two of Britain's greatest artists. And I think that is certainly how we're framing our thinking about them. And just thinking about those iconic images that they conjured, where our kind of sense of the visual and sense of cinema couldn't be the same again. Thinking of the fantastic Stairway to Heaven in A Matter of Life and Death, or the pair of red shoes that magically and demonically jump onto Moira Shearer's feet in The Red Shoes. Or, for me, probably the most erotic, defiant moment in cinema as somebody tells you they're no longer going to be a nun, I'm putting on my lipstick. Kathleen Byron means business at this moment is an extraordinary moment of cinema in close-up. I think a lot of people come to the films of Powell and Pressburger with a sense of, they think they know what they are. And something I've mentioned a number of times to people was an experience I had with a colleague of mine, not in the archive, I have to say, who referred to Powell and Pressburger's films as cozy tea time viewing. And my instant response is, have you actually watched them? And we just had a little brainstorm about the words that to all of us working on the project first came to mind when we thought about their films. And these are the kinds of words that we thought about that feel in many ways about as far away you could get from coziness as you could possibly be. So for any filmmaker to have those kind of words associated with them, I think is a big deal around the kind of ways you can go, the way you can engage audiences, and also show that things that were largely made in the 40s and 50s are not some antique, irrelevant museum pieces. Powell and Pressburger themselves, I think, also extraordinarily fascinating characters. And part of a core aim of the project is to demystify the roles of each one of them. I'll come on to that in a moment. But Powell largely started his career in the industry as assistant director, as a photographer. He was the photographer on Hitchcock's Champagne and Hitchcock's Bacchanal, for example. He ended up going to France, where he worked with the American director Rex Ingram on a number of silent films before coming back to the UK, where he made a series of relatively low-budget films in the early 1930s, sometimes referred to as the quota quickies. But within those, you start seeing the beatings of what is going to be a great auteur. Pressburger, and he's the one who's too often written out of the story. People often say Powell and Pressburger, and what they actually are talking about is Powell. Pressburger could not be more impactful on what these films are. And what I find so fascinating about his story is he was born in Hungary from a Jewish background. He worked in Germany in the early 1930s, including with major filmmakers like Siodmak. Necessarily, 33 happens. He has to flee Nazi Germany as a Jew. He moves to France, works in France briefly, then comes to the UK, and he's taken on board by Alexander Korda, the big movie mogul who transformed the British film industry at the beginning of the 1930s. Korda, also a Hungarian. And here you have this person from a Jewish Hungarian background who's worked across Europe, yet as the key writer of the couple, informs over the next couple of decades the representation of Britishness, Englishness, Scottishness in our cinema. That is quite for me, a really kind of fascinating way about how we look at who constructs the voices in British cinema. Onto the famous credit, there are not many filmmakers who have worked in this way, where they share the billing between them. And in a way, this is part of a kind of key narrative we're talking about in the project that we're working on at BFI South Bank, and that would be the nature of collaboration. And I'll come to that in a moment. I'm not sure if this is 100% strictly always true, but this is how Thelma Schoonmaker Powell defined the relationship between, the separation of work between Powell and Pressburger. Thelma, as you may or may not know, is not only one of the world's greatest editors, as the editor of, by far and away, the majority of Martin Scorsese's work, but is the widow of Michael Powell, and we've worked very closely, Claire in particular, has worked with Thelma over many years in bringing Michael Powell's collection into the BFI National Archive. I mentioned collaboration, and again, it's a story of other Europeans from mainland Europe impacting the work of British film, where you've got such great artists, particularly as Hein Heckroth and Alfred Younger, truly impacting the look of British film. But what we were really interested in was, we talk so much in terms of auteurism, and it's not that we're trying to deny auteurism. Powell and Pressburger, brilliant, brilliant artists in their own right. But what we're really interested in is the way in which everyone from a composer to an actor, to a designer, to a cinematographer impacts on a creative vision. And Powell and Pressburger worked with a number of these people on multiple occasions. So it wasn't that they're exactly a rep company, but you cannot see Powell and Pressburger's own work in isolation from these other people. And I think it opens up really useful conversations around contemporary filmmaking and how we look at those people who repeatedly work together with partners, whether it's Spike Lee and Terence Blanchard, whether it's Martin Scorsese and Thelma Schoonmaker. There are so many examples, Noah Baumbach, Greta Gerwig, of people who choose to work together, and whose vision does this become, and can you imagine their work without the others involved? And I thought what we also felt was really important is understanding the kind of auteurism that actors have. And we don't often talk about actors in that term, about how they impact on a feel of a director's work. At the core of this project is the group of films that Powell and Pressburger made under the moniker of The Archers. And I love this quote from Scorsese, where he talks about these films made as The Archers, the longest period of subversive filmmaking in a major studio ever, which again really kind of helps to reframe expectations. And I can think of few films, even within Powell and Pressburger's own work, as utterly extraordinary and bizarre as Tales of Hoffman in terms of the imagery they are throwing at you. I think most people would assume that was a take from RuPaul's Drag Race, not an adaptation of an Offenbach operetta. This is the list of the films they worked on together throughout that core period as The Archer. We're necessarily going to be showing all of those at the BFI. But we're also looking at their work, other work together, such as these, both before that formal partnership or embedded partnership happened and after it kind of collapsed, and also their work on their own. So we're looking at trying to understand how their work felt. What were those elements that were exclusively Powellish, or what were those elements that were exclusively Pressburgian? Yes, there's Helen Mirren in one of her, I think, is that her first actual starring role on film? Might be. So teen Helen Mirren there. And we're also showing some of the early work, some of the Pressburger's work. Twice Upon a Time, I'm not going to sell it to you as a lost masterpiece, it's not. However, it's been wholly unseen. It's a kids' film made by Pressburger, and we're making it available for the first time in an eternity. But I think really interesting to be able to go back to work from Germany and France as part of the mix and further understand the European nature of it. Area we're developing quite a lot in terms of some narratives we're telling, particularly online, is again an aspect of filmmaking that's really discussed. The ones that got away, the projects that filmmakers worked on for years and years and years, often with their biggest passion projects, but never kind of realized in any way. One of the real riches we have is the collection of work we have around The Tempest, including production designs. You know, who wouldn't want to have seen James Mason as Prospero or Mia Farrow's Ariel? I'm wholly intrigued by the notion of that. But indeed, who wouldn't have wanted to see Michael Powell's Lord of the Rings or Wizard of Earthsea? There are so many themes that run across the films and can be teased out in different ways. I've always been particularly intrigued by the queerness of representation in Powell and Pressburger. It's not across all the films. There's obviously Anton Walbrook in The Red Shoes, a not ambiguously ambiguous character. But when it comes to queers per square inch, nothing quite beats A Canterbury Tale. I think there are at least 3 characters you could identify as lesbians in that film, and one always that particularly intrigues me is Judith Furze. Powell cast her on a couple of occasions. She also plays Sister Bryony in Black Narcissus, but Judith Furze is one of the very, very few out lesbians in the 1940s British cinema, and he casts her in an absolutely clearly lesbian role. She even eyes up another woman and gives, there's a kind of almost like not quite a wink to camera, but not far away from it. One of the areas I think it is problematic within the worlds of Powell and Pressburger, including so much film of that period, is representation of race. On one level, you have them repeatedly using across 3 films the Indian star Sabu, plays a key role in Black Narcissus. At the other end, you've got them resorting to browning up white actors to play Indian and Tibetan characters in Black Narcissus. And so there's Gene Simmons, who plays the character Kanchi. And as far as I'm aware, Gene Simmons has 0 Indian heritage. There's a really interesting response to that film made by the artist Michelle Williams-Gammaker, and I think Claire will probably tell a bit more about it later, but Claire's hoping to do some work with Michelle as part of this project. But certainly if you haven't seen it, I think it's available online still. Michelle made a fascinating piece about the casting of Kanchi in Black Narcissus and how she kind of reframes and reimagines that, but it makes a really fascinating piece of contextual work and a different way and different prism for looking at Black Narcissus and the more problematic elements within it. Also within the book, Claire will tell a bit more about later, the Indian novelist Mahesh Rao has written a new piece looking at Black Narcissus from a specifically Indian perspective. An area where there is, again, real riches, but also problems is in Powell's representation, and Pressburger's representation of women. You've got some of the best written roles for women of the period within their films. At the same time, there is Powell's own problematic relationship with a number of the women he worked with, including Pamela Brown in I Know Where I'm Going, but I think a really rich vein of exploring those. I'll give you a kind of whiz through of how we're structuring our own program at BFI South Bank. I would say, though, it's one of those things where we've got a very large number of films. They're not, the way we're structuring it is not necessarily the core narratives we're talking about. It's simply a way to help navigate our audiences through the films. So key area looking at some of the kind of the beauty of the Technicolor, but we don't want to put all of our eggs into one basket. So these tend to be the truly spectacular films. We're looking at war. We know there is an audience for war. Is it our major narrative? No, not at all. But we know that those can be sometimes tougher to sell, but there is a lot also to talk about. When we're talking about the subversion and difficulty and unease within the film, seeing these obsessives and outsiders as a core narrative feels key. There are so many people who fit kind of uncomfortably and are difficult characters, and no more so than the Karl-Heinz Bohm character in Peeping Tom. We're also very aware of the kind of a community of interest whose interest is not necessarily just film. And we've been thinking about a lot in the kind of shaping of this project, which I think Rydian will come on to in a bit, of how we look outside our own worlds of film and don't just talk to a film audience. And this is one of the ways we're doing it through the number of films they made from the worlds of opera and dance, trying to find a new audience to cinema, but we know are particularly interested in films, whether it's O Rosalinda, which is an adaptation of Strauss's Die Fledermaus, Offenbach's Tales of Hoffmann, The Red Shoes, obviously, and there's a Powell's film of Bluebeard's Castle, which is an adaptation of the Bela Bartok opera. We're also looking at landscape and the nature of the mythologization of particularly the English landscape, that kind of border territory with Shropshire and Wales, up to Scotland with Mull. And I think particularly the English ones, A Canterbury Tale fits most strongly, but how they create magic and wonder with a sense of UK landscape. And also there was a lot of location filming across their work, whether it's filming in Shropshire, whether it's in Abbotsbury and Dorset, or Tabermore in the Isle of Mull. There are lots where you can look at maybe location-specific screenings. Huge impact on the work of Powell and Pressburger on filmmaking and filmmakers. Obviously, the most famous one by a long shot is going to be Martin Scorsese, who not only is their direct influence in his own work and much acknowledged influence within Scorsese's work, but Scorsese's played a huge role in the advocacy of Powell and Pressburger in getting their works restored. So there have been a whole number of restorations were undertaken by the Film Foundation of the biggest films. They have recently funded the BFI National Archive to restore 4 films, and we're just completing those. So he's not only majorly influenced, but a huge advocate. But just to give you a sense of some of the other filmmakers whose work has been impacted in one way or another, these are all people where either we have seen directly the influence of their work, of Powell and Pressburger on their work, or they have spoken at length. You know, Joanna Hogg, a new film coming out shortly, you know, few people have referenced Powell and Pressburger as clearly and as authoritatively as Joanna Hogg, for example. And in fact, the release of the new film is going to coincide with this project in the autumn. And Greta Gerwig, who Ty mentioned earlier, we have it on authority that Greta spoke to the design team on Barbie about the impact of the look of Powell and Pressburger Technicolor films on what they were trying to achieve. I'm just going to give you now a bit of a canter through some of those other films you can think about, where we draw a line either between a connection either between a direct influence, like An American in Paris, or films that have kind of impacted upon Powell and Pressburger themselves, like I think I mentioned earlier, Blackmail by Hitchcock. But the range of titles is kind of vast. We're not necessarily showing all of these, we're just kind of finalizing our own program. But there are so many connections you can make with the world of cinema to address multiple audiences and start looking at what those connections might be. And what intrigues me so much is really just looking at the nature of impact within kind of wider film culture, that we sometimes think of these films as being a little parochial, a little British. Remember, first of all, that in 1948, the #1 film at the American box office, not the British box office, was The Red Shoes. A Matter of Life and Death was a big deal. You know, big enough deal to influence a Tom and Jerry cartoon. And years later, it gets spoofed in Bill and Ted. It gets spoofed in Simpsons. They're not kind of fly-by-nights who only spoke to tea time audiences on BBC Two. These are filmmakers who had global impact and spoke to big popular audiences. And at which point I'm going to hand over from the look at the slide to Claire.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Claire, so I work with the BFI's special collections. What is that, you may ask? It's essentially the vast paper archive at the BFI that we use to tell some, the wider stories that go into filmmaking and to represent some of those broader voices. So these collections are rich and vast and play a really critical part in how we're approaching Powell and Pressburger, particularly in thinking about them as filmmakers who stretched across the wider arts. So I'm going to give you a sneak peek today of the publication that we prepared in conjunction with the season, which we've called The Cinema of Powell and Pressburger, but really it is looking at that kind of pan-arts reach and using a broad range of themes to take us deep into the collections. So just to quickly talk through some of the authors that we've got, you can see on screen there, and I'm happy to share things afterwards as well. We have one of the key chapters that we start off with is Exiles by Caitlin MacDonald. She wrote her PhD on Pressburger, and this for us is a really great opportunity to come back to what Robin said about foregrounding Pressburger's particular contribution to their cinema and how his status really as a political refugee, an outsider himself, shaped their cinema. We've got Alexandra Harris, who's broadcast and written on a really wide range of topics, from weather in British art to romanticism, taking us really on a pilgrimage through their real and imagined lands, picking up on that idea of landscape, but also journeying, and how that works in their cinema. Black Narcissus, as Robin said, is revisited by the novelist Mahesh Rao, who has thought about it from an Anglo-Indian perspective, and he's done a really kind of beautiful take on that film, which celebrates its power, but also acknowledges the troubling beauty, I guess, within it. Sarah Street will be a name familiar to many of you. It's an extensive amount on the world of colour. Here she approaches it as an emotion, as a landscape, as a technique within their cinema. So looking at that's been really significant for us. And we also have the Bernadine Christie, again, established name in relation to Powell and Pressburger, looking at their many, many optical devices and what that means. And just to give you a sense of the look and the layout of the book, again, we've really used the collections to try and bring their cinema to life, to celebrate the diverse range of artistic practices that went into their work. And here we have the wonderful Red Shoes. And just to come back to Michelle's work, again, within the book, what we really wanted to do is to allow a range of contemporary voices to speak to themselves about how Powell and Pressburger have shaped their practice. So just looking at Michelle's work, she's done a trilogy of pieces, including The House of Women, which is where she recast the role of Kanchi, using a contemporary first or second generation immigrants to talk about well, basically to give a voice back to Kanchi. That was the aim of the piece. And she is also being represented in the exhibition that we're putting together. This is really, it marks the 75th anniversary of the Red Shoes this year. We're going to do a deep dive into the film via the collections that we care for, which is a really great opportunity again to think about the significance of this film to a contemporary audience, what it means in the here and now. One of the key things for us was to try and bring that Pan Arts audience into the BFI. So we're centering our journey on the performer Moira Shearer, who at 21 years old is stepping into the Red Shoes and the world of film for the first time. So we really wanted to do the exhibition through her eyes as somebody who is, again, discovering this really kind of wonderful, but often quite difficult world of film in a new way. And as well as having the collections at the heart of that, we are creating quite a theatrical and immersive space to really take people over the threshold and into the world of filmmaking. So we're working with the designer Simon Costin, who has been fantastic in really embracing the language of Powell and Pressburger's cinema, their love of art and artifice, and using the technologies that they also had such an adoration of. So really kind of bringing that to audiences within the space. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Rydian. I'm going back to Robin, sorry.
Just changing the order on the phone.
Thanks, Rydian. As I mentioned up front, one of the kind of key things that we're trying to do is really embed within this project real work on materials and make sure the films look better than they've ever looked. And so it's been a big story for the archive in the work that we have been up to for quite a while now. Oops, it's gone into a weird order. We have done a wide range of both restoration and remastering. So we're making materials available that really won't have been seen. A lot of these were going online. They might not necessarily have cinema context, but for example, include Powell and Pressburger's home movies with scenes of them shooting, that they were shooting of their own kind of on location. There's some particularly great stuff on of them filming on location in Uruguay on the battles of Venezuela, excuse my South American locations, but on the Battle of the River Plate. And there's some fantastic things that haven't been seen, these kind of so-called Riviera revels. One of them includes Michael Powell not only worked as assistant director within them, but also as an actor. So you see him dressed up as a faun. We've created a whole series of new 35mm prints that will be premiering as part of the project, as part of our ongoing project, trying to return films that you can only see on digital, classic films, to make them available again on 35mm to help audiences today get a bit closer to the look and feel of how they were originally seen. And lovely. Oh, great. Marvelous. I'll hand back to you. And hopefully that will give you a taste. But what I was going to say was, if any of you are interested in talking about restoration, or wanting to tell those stories about what is it the work that has to happen on these films? What are the original negatives like? We have experts in the BFI National Archive, particularly my colleagues, Kieran Webb and Elena Lepotu, who I'm sure would love to have that kind of dialogue with your audiences. So if you think it's something that would add to part of a mix, I'd say this could be a great opportunity of this project, of that wider discussion of what an archives do. And in my capacity as Claire's agent, I would say exactly the same with Claire and Special Collections, that even if we're not able to take these amazing artifacts on tour, that ability to engage your audiences and give them basically a private insight into some of those collections with Claire. Sorry, Ted's here first. We were dating at lunchtime.
So I'm just going to say a few things about some of the kind of outputs of the project, and some of them confirmed, some of them in development, and then a few possible sort of leads for ideas as we go into kind of thinking about what else we can do across the UK. And one, I mean, Ty already touched on this, having a core sort of menu of titles that are four of the big five. I guess Blimp is the big fifth that's not on here, but these are four titles with big recognition. We are going out with two FDA theatrical releases. The first one is the new BFI restoration of I Know Where I'm Going, which looks absolutely magnificent and quite transformed in its new restoration, I understand. I haven't seen it yet. And so that'll go out shortly after the season opens, around the 20th of October. The Red Shoes, in time for Christmas, December release, around the 8th of December. And then A Matter of Life and Death and Black Narcissus, we've sub-licensed from Park Circus, and they will be available from BFI distribution. Certainly, A Matter of Life and Death and Black Narcissus will be available non-theatrically through the whole period. I'm just awaiting confirmation from distribution on how they're handling non-theatrical around the FDA release titles, but we will get that confirmed as soon as possible. BFI distribution are also throwing a spotlight on some of the lesser known titles which are available in newer materials. And obviously, while the full range of Powell and Pressburger is all available for you to think and develop ideas, nonetheless, these will be quite easily bookable, and there's some great works here. Bluebeard's Castle, you've already seen one or two fabulous stills from it, and also this short, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, could work quite nicely together as a programme. Edge of the World, what a gift of a title to take to the Highlands and Islands in Scotland, where it will already be very, very well known. The story of the kind of evacuation of the archipelago of Hirta, and then return to the Edge of the World, the film in which the BBC teamed up with Michael Powell to revisit and return to the young people who had originally left their island. This film will also be available. This is from Altitude. It will be a new documentary feature hosted and presented by Martin Scorsese. He's a little bit busy at the moment, so he hasn't actually recorded the voiceover yet. Consequently, we don't exactly know when it will be ready, but we are expecting it to get its world premiere in one of the big festivals towards the end of the year, and we are certainly expecting it to be available to play during the season. Busyness of Scorsese also means we haven't quite landed on the date when he's going to be coming to BFI South Bank, but we are very, very hopeful we'll do that very soon. And of course, Thelma Schoonmaker, who's been a kind of a massive force behind this project, we'll also be hoping to welcome, and and hopefully there might be opportunities for her to go to some other locations outside London and do talks. We know that lots of you have relationships with her. She's a fellow of universities. She opened the GFT bookshop. Let's see. That's all being negotiated. She'll also be very involved in the opening moment for us in June in Bologna, when an early Powell retrospective will play there, and we are hoping that she'll be there to. And they haven't absolutely confirmed yet. It's very hard to confirm everything, even though it's in under a month. But we're hoping that there'll be a screening of Black Narcissus in the Piazza as well. So that will be a nice international kind of start kickoff to it all. And so yes, we very much hope we'll be welcoming Thelma, and Kevin MacDonald and Andrew MacDonald, part of the Pressburger clan, will also be joining us for the season. We are also very hopeful that we'll be presenting a passionate advocate who's already contributed to the book, Tilda Swinton, and we may be looking at Joanna Hogg's cinema at the same time, another passionate advocate. So we'll these are just some of the names that are very much lined up for the season. Here are some of the other names associated with Powell and Pressburger, the writers, artists, musicians who've all been inspired by P&P directly in their work in some cases, and in some cases we just know that they're passionate fans. We won't be able to invite all of these people. We won't be able to accommodate and facilitate events with them all. But there's a great opportunity, especially for where you have your own relationships with some of these kind of individuals to get some brilliant, passionate speakers to advocate for the films. We dream of landing Kate Bush. It'll be the 30th anniversary of the Red Shoes this year, which was, of course, very much inspired by the Red Shoes, and her film, The Line, the Cross, and the Curve, as well, which she apparently is embarrassed about it, doesn't like it, but maybe we could reconcile her with that, and let's just see, let's hope. And there might be creative ways of working with the music of Kate Bush and the passion that she had for the Red Shoes and the influence she obviously now carries with the Stranger Things generation, if not. Someone we're already in conversation with is Matthew Bourne and his team, whose choreography for the Red Shoes has itself been a cinema release as alternative content. And we are discussing with them both for items for the exhibition, but also possibly whether we can work with the choreography and possibly some dancers in training to present an immersive dance experience across BFI South Bank. If people are interested, perhaps we could broker for the choreography to be more available if other people want to work with their own local dance companies or dance schools. Oops, let's flick past. Artists have been influenced by Powell and Pressburger across all range of media, but one medium in which they've been influenced by them is film and video. These are just some of the examples, of which there are many more, of artists' work. Victor Bergin's Listen to Britain, inspired by a Canterbury and a recut of A Canterbury Tale, which I think started live at the Arnold Feeney here in Bristol. He's still around, and that's a great piece, originally presented as an installation loop, but also available as a 7-minute extra on DVDs. There is this Afrofuturist abstract animators short, Even When Life is Sad, People Still Have a Good Time. That's a Canadian, Nigerian artist who did some wonderful found footage work. And we've already talked about Michelle Williams-Gamaker, which has another piece about Michael Powell, Thieves, currently on at the South London Gallery, which is looking at the making of Thief of Baghdad. So there's a really long and continuous influence on artists and the art world. I moved to Folkestone recently, and this is really helping me to kind of think about looking at the blockbuster UK-wide from a kind of regional perspective and what we might do in Kent. Kent is obviously a very heartland place. Michael Powell was born and grew up and went to school in Canterbury. The Canterbury Tale is the obvious film which people can play and get excited about. But thinking more laterally, well, there's the business of remembrance and memorializing the war is a big business around my neck of the woods. And what could be more natural than a matter of life and death at an aircraft museum reunited with the planes? Or perhaps what could be more natural than watching a matter of life and death in a medical hospital, in a medical cinema, where you could recline in the very VIP seating that they have available, be fixed up with your own drip, and experience a truly immersive big screen journey into heaven. Speaking of heaven, of course, the designs for heaven are absolutely fabulous. What I love is the way that this sort of the conceptualization of heaven also wraps in this idea of the camera obscura. So if you're into creating fantastic sets for giant immersive events, why not recreate heaven? If you can't do that, but if you have a camera obscura locally, as we do indeed in Bristol, well, why not do a partnership with them and have a workshop or discovery session for audiences to discover the camera obscura and the workings of light and refraction. So here's some of the things that we'll be doing with Powell and Pressburger online. We're going to have a fabulous player collection. We're just working out the details of licensing the key titles for player with ITV at the moment. There'll be free access to some titles on YouTube. We've got Michael Powell's home videos, all sorts of wonderful, rich materials which can be drawn from in all sorts of settings. We'll have 3 new video essays, including one on the impact of P&P on popular culture, another looking at the unrealized films, and another on the strangeness and weirdness and magic of Powell and Pressburger in 10 essential moments. So there'll be a very rich experience online to complement any activities. We're going to go out with a first program announcement. Obviously, we've put a placeholder out already, but this will be a bit of a program announcement on the 27th of June. So as soon as I leave here, I'll be rushing to go and get names confirmed in time for that. You don't have to have your activity confirmed by the 27th of June. That would be insane. But there'll be another release to announce all of that a bit later on. And I'm very, very pleased that we were able to sneak in a preview of the season artwork at the last sort of moment. I think they've taken a brilliant approach, really looking to reposition Powell and Pressburger in a kind of fresh and very contemporary way, and drawing on the incredible kind of imagery to, it's a shame we've got a bit of some of the house lights on the screen, so you're not seeing in its full luxury colors, and that's how it'll look on the Jubilee line. And here's another kind of example, quite a sort of strong contemporary feminine, I would go as far as to say feminine kind of styling with, thank you very much, with the colours and choices. It's very interesting. I mean, Robin was talking about the international interest in the Sight and Sound poll. The number of British women creatives who are influenced and excited by Powell and Pressburger and Sight. There's one Scottish filmmaker who puts 2 films in the top 10, I think. So there's everyone from Tilda Swinton, Joanna Hogg, and Kate Bush. Bread Shoes plays a strong role in that, as does I Know Where I'm Going, but they're not the only titles. And there's how that one also looks on the Jubilee line. Now we do have, I think, a sneak peek of the trailer to show. We didn't get it embedded into the slide deck in time, so there'll need to be a little bit of a switch over. So.
Yeah, Sam, could you put the lights down for this one?
Time rushes by. Love rushes by. Life rushes by. What do you want? To live? I want to create. To make something big out of something little.
To dance. I gave up my vows.
Nothing is stronger than the law in the universe. But on Earth, nothing is stronger than love.
thank you guys. Yeah, we're right on time actually. So Maddie, would you like to introduce our next guest? We'll need you in front of the mic so the online audience can hear you.
Just before we introduce the next guest, I just wanted to get a sense of if you've got any burning questions that you'd like to ask. You're very welcome to ask a question now, especially for our online audience who won't be joining us.
I do have one from Carmen and Sue at Depot who ask, where is the Powell and Pressburger exhibition going to be held?
Yeah, do you want to come on?
So we'll be taking over a space at BFI South Bank. If you know it's the upstairs bit of the site, taking over an event space and turning it into dedicated exhibition space. It will be 200 square meters at the BFI, but we've designed it in sections so that each one is self-contained and modular to tell a part of the story. So it can be broken down into small sections.
And we have one more question on the chat. Toby said, Moviola would be very interested in offering non-theatrical screenings to our network of community cinemas. So any extra info on non-theatrical availability would be super.
Work in progress.
Indeed. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all of the titles in the BFI South Bank season, plus a few that aren't, and have a document, and it's mostly there, but just not quite ready to share just yet, which will have the rights information, materials information, contact information, all in kind of one place. So I don't know that we'll have non-theatrical rights information on every title that's in there, but all of our core ones we will. So we had Julie Pierce, who has an extraordinary job as both head of distribution and head of program operations at BFI South Bank, was in hospital last week, and I've badgered her enough for this, but she'll need a little bit more time just to pull that information together. So we'll get it to you as soon as possible.
Yeah, but can you just get a mic?
Let me just get a mic for you, Mark.
Okay, the new 35mm prints that you are producing, will they be available regionally for those? Hello, Robin. For those cinemas who don't have two 35mm projectors but need to work off a platter.
It will depend upon the 35mm print, not the new ones.
Not the new ones, okay.
The new prints have cost a fortune, as do 35mm prints do now, and so we're having to ensure they're projected through kind of full archival processes. Just to let you know, we're just finalising what the requirements will be of screening those. Obviously, we want them to be screened at the same time. The sheer cost of them. We've had several bad experiences recently where some major prints have been basically destroyed that are going to cost us a fortune. So we're just kind of agreeing now what it is that we need people to be able to adhere to screen those. But obviously, we really want people who care about the films and showing film to have that opportunity to do so. But I hope we'll be able to communicate that very soon.
Question at the back. No, because we've got an online audience, so if you can just wait for a second, that'd be great.
It connects to the previous question, basically. Sometimes when the remaster or 35mm comes, there is a holdback for that title. Is it the case in this session, or it will be free to show at the same time with the remastered copies?
So that's currently under negotiation,
That one is.
And we will find out very shortly whether the two films that are being reissued, the Red Shoes and I Know Where I'm Going, whether those will be made available at the same time or a little bit later. But we are prepared to take bookings until the end of Feb for non-theatrical venues. So if you're missing out during the autumn, you can still do something in January, February. We've got our next guests coming in remotely from the States. Pamela Hutchinson, who is a fantastic film writer and historian, and we'll be releasing a new book on the red shoes to tie in with this season. And I thought Pamela would be a great person to talk a little bit about her book, but also give you some inspiration, and is also a potential guest speaker you might want to think about. Pam's got a big following across the UK and has done a lot of public speaking in various locations. So hopefully Pam's there in the background, Sam. Yeah, so if you bring her to the screen, we'll switch to that. Hi, Pam. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, hello. Is this that terrifying moment where I'm a large head in a big room? I don't have any slides, which I wish I did now. Can you see me? Yeah. Yes. Okay. Hello. Can you hear me?
Can you hear us?
Yes.
We can heckle them.
Yes. So I'm terribly sorry. I'm not in Iowa. I'm at home in the UK in my half-decorated office in West Sussex, the undersung shooting location for the Black Narcissus, which people always forget to mention. But I am here with some thoughts about the red shoes and the book, and I'm also a little bit overwhelmed and excited by everything I've seen so far this morning. Madeline has introduced me far too flatteringly, so I won't do that. Yeah, so I have written a short book, a very short book on the red shoes. It's part of the BFI Film Classics series, so you understand the kind of the size of it. There was far more that I wanted to cover than I could get in, but I've done my best. It's going to be released this autumn on the 5th of October 2023 to coincide with as far as I was aware, the 75th anniversary of the film's release, but now also I see the Powell and Pressburger celebrations more widely, and actually an FDA release of the film, which is very exciting. It's a daunting book to write about because film to write about because so much has been written, but as Robin Baker says, all the stories have not yet been told. So hopefully we'll find something exciting to talk about the red shoes. So the book is actually the product of lots of archival research, international archival research, and like many BFI Film Classics, it's also the product of my kind of personal response to the film. Because I had a limited space and so much has been done, there were particular areas I chose to focus on, some of which have been touched on already in the presentations. So obviously I talked about Powell and Pressburger, their collaboration and the particular magic that occurs in their films, which is so important to this film. I tried to look at the wider group of creatives who are working on the film, who have obviously been well studied elsewhere. The Red Shoes is a film with a very long production history. Some people may not be aware that it's based on a story from the 1910s. It's based in the 1920s ballet culture. It was started in the 1930s and redrafted several times in the 40s. So there's a long history to this film. A slightly undertrod avenue of research for me was the British ballet culture in the 1940s. It was a very important time for British ballet culture and sort of British art culture more generally, obviously post-war, but with particular developments in the Britishness of ballet. So I've tried to situate the film within that. I obviously, we've seen so many beautiful images already this morning, wanted to go along on the symbolism of the red shoes and what that means in terms of the fairy tale, the Hans Christian Andersen source of the film, but also how it works with the aesthetics of Powell and Pressburger, what it means for dancers, what it means for women more generally. And of course, I don't want to ruin anything for anyone who's there in the audience, but this film has a particularly shocking ending, and the ending has been talked about in lots of ways that are sometimes quite reductive. And I really wanted to get stuck into what I think the ending and the sort of horror tone of the film in general means, and therefore I looked at lots of other feminist critiques of the film and found my way to a thesis of sorts. So my book situates the film within the careers of the people who made it, including many of the people who've been mentioned here this morning, Moira Shearer, very much so, Anton Walbrook, Powell and Pressburger and their team, Hein Heckroth, etc. And it does go into some sort of less explored areas such as ballet culture and symbolism. And I really wanted to have something to say about the ending of the film and the sort of feminist response to the film, because anyone who's seen the film will know that the ending of the film has shocked critics at the time. It terrified many young women, anecdotally, and yet did not seem to deter tens of thousands of young people from embarking on ballet lessons. So that's my idea of an interesting problem to solve. So one of the strands that I pulled out of the film, and this is something that I think is quite timely and quite timeless, is this idea of the monstrosity of artists. And we have this in the sort of horror elements of the ballet sequence and the presentation of Lermontov, played by Anton Walbrook, and Victoria Page, played by Maura Shearer. The selfishness and ruthlessness required to be a perfectionist, to develop the greater part of one's life to the creation of something lasting, as you heard in the trailer. This is definitely a story for obsessives and outsiders. If you take one thing from my book, is that if we're talking about perfectionists and great geniuses, we have to talk about Maura Shearer as one of those, as well as Powell, Pressburger, Corder, Lermontov, etc. Now, the famous quote from Michael Powell, of course, is that we had all been told for 10 years to go out and die for freedom and democracy. Now the war was over, the Red Shoes told us to go out and die for art. I don't have a copy of my book because it hasn't been published, but I do realise that I have a great prop in my desk diary, which is just here, and you've probably got a copy of this yourself. So that's the story of the Red Shoes in a nutshell. As many of the Archer's wartime films, their previous films in this sort of great run of triumphs, had been commissioned with sort of propagandic intent or with propagandic messages weaved into them, I would argue that the Red Shoes itself is powerful, very powerful propaganda for art. And it is also a work of art in itself, as we've discussed with the work of Hyde Heckroth and Brian Easdale and the ballet itself. It inspires through its own excellence. And the magic of the film is that even as it inspires and argues for art, it's also a terrible warning about the consequences of choosing the artistic life. So I do find the Red Shoes quite timely at this moment in 2023. It ties into contemporary debates about the private lives of artists and whether we can reconcile our, our idea of the art, our response to the art, with our knowledge of the artist. But also, I think much more importantly and much more seriously, this film, which was made in an earlier period of national austerity, reminds us that art is essential and culture is worth fighting for. These days, in economic inequality and cuts to higher education, etc., are squeezing more and more young people and whole social classes out of the artistic life. And the message of the Red Shoes seems to resonate more than ever, that you will need access to the best in life. Now, like many of the Archer's international earlier wartime films as well, The Red Shoes is also a film about international collaboration. The Ballet Lermontov itself is a complete mirror for the Powell and Pressburger's group of collaborators who were from all parts of the European continent and beyond. Obviously, Robert Helpman was Australian. It's a film about international solidarity and collaboration, and made in 1947, made in a divided Europe, a continent ravaged by war. And in that way, it sadly very much speaks to our times as well. When I was writing this book last summer, in the heat wave that we had, I ended up writing it in many parts of the world as I was traveling for work. But when I was driving around West Sussex here, every time I saw a Ukrainian flag in a window or on a farmhouse gate, I realized, this message of European solidarity is really a message for this time as well as their time as well. So it is a film that I think has this sort of remarkable impact, and I think the many mentions of artists and filmmakers and so on who've been so inspired by the film already in this talk will testify to that. And I think that it particularly does have a strong appeal to younger audiences. I know how I felt when I first saw the film. I also, whenever I told people last year that I was working on this project, the gasp when people rushed to tell me how much the film had meant to them, and their parents often, the number of times people told me their father had been to see it multiple times. That's a whole area of research I can get into. But it is a film about ambition. So it's a film for young people. It's a film about the drive to succeed. And it's also in many ways about intergenerational conflict. Many people will know, some people won't, there was actually a class narrative in this film that has been removed. Vestigially, it's there as well. It is a film that subverts expectations, just as Robin was discussing about the sort of wider Powell and Pressburger oeuvre. It's not cozy tea time viewing, even though it is ostensibly something that we show to children. It emerges actually from a mostly forgotten now tradition of ballet melodramas in which working class dancers find themselves in love with sort of benevolent aristocrats, and gives us instead a young woman of immense privilege, in thrall to a cruel genius, the genius which may be the same monstrosity and cruelty that she shares herself. So Victoria Page and Boris Lermontov share a connection that's far deeper than romance, far deeper than the romantic connection between Victoria Page and Maris Gorin's character. And so this is a film that offers, like many Powell and Pressburger films, offers this ideal of heterosexual romance and then completely dashes it away from us. And the queerness of this film, while often submerged, is central to its meaning and its power. On the point about ballet films, The Red Shoes really is a pivot in history of this subgenre, so it pairs very well with ballet films or as part of a sort of mini strand. There's so many things about The Red Shoes that changed the sort of path of this subgenre. The psychological and body horror elements became almost inescapable. Even the most classic and tween-age friendly ballet film has what I would call sort of moments of foot gore, or at least shoe gore, which cannot be escaped. And it expressed in the way that no film had really done so well before, and in a very different way, the idea that a career in dance, as in any of the arts, requires an extraordinary level of commitment. Sort of referring back to the points about queerness and camp, which some people have associated with the film and its artificiality, that to me is surely one way to explain the popularity of the film with the cast and crew of Barbie. I await with bated breath to see how they have interpreted the technicolor theatricality of oil paint and canvas backdrops and technicolor filming into sort of a more digital and high-tech techni Barbie arena. The aesthetic of the film continues to inspire again and again, and I think that there is a sort of hunger for this kind of flagrantly artificial and theatrical style at the moment. Of course, Joanna Hogg's Souvenir films are a great example of this, and her early short Caprice, which I think is newly available for people to see as well. All of these things, they come together with the heightened visual style, the expressionist design, of course, its gory conclusion, no spoilers, though I may have already done that several times in this talk, supernatural elements, and a very chilling tone. We've seen many images already of Anton Walbrook's fist and Moira Shearer's fist, make this essentially a horror film, of course. I'm not the first person to say so. Its influence on subsequent horror, particularly ballet horrors such as Suspiria and Black Swan, is sort of incalculable, really. And this may not be what younger audiences expect from a 75-year-old film about ballet, but of course, audiences in 1948 didn't necessarily see it coming either. And this film sort of is built around these core shocks. So I think, to conclude too patly, but the film is a film of great ambition. The film is about ambition, and I suppose it's up to us to respond to that ambition and its vision of excellence. I'm sure that the film will appeal to many audiences, but particularly to young people, and I hope that we can show this film in situations where these conversations can continue after the credits roll, where we can pair it with some artistic inspiration, also pair it with dance and horror, and of course, as we've said several times this morning, it can be positioned as a testament to the genius of Powell and Pressburger, but also the emphasis can be put on several of the key creatives within the film. Interesting to see what art students would make of it, of course. There are many stories to be told, and they tell wider stories about our film culture. So just to take the life story of Anton Walbrook as a gay refugee, building his film star career back up in Britain, and how that worked after fleeing the Nazis, that would be an exemplar of the kind of people who are working on this film. This is a film made largely by people in exile, from Emeric Pressburger to his crew down, by queer and marginalised talents. And in this narrative, they demand censor stage. It is indeed a story that was inspired by a gay love triangle. Screening The Red Shoes is, among many other things, an opportunity to remind ourselves of the international contribution to mid-century British film, and that's very exciting in itself. I say that, and I'm only really just beginning to be aware of how big the nationwide celebration is going to be. I'm here. I'm very happy to talk about The Red Shoes. The book is out on the 5th of October. I think some of you know me, and if you have any questions now or subsequently in the coming months, I'll be happy to chat further. I hope you're as excited about The Red Shoes as I am. Thanks for listening.
So do we have any questions for Pam at all? Oh, she's gone.
I'm
No?
here.
Are you still here?
I'm here.
Sam, do you think you could bring Pam back? Yeah, thanks.
Hi.
Pam back.
Again, sorry about the office.
Yeah, so it's worth noting Pam's based in the southeast. If we have any venues from that part of the world, but is also an intrepid traveller. Does anyone have any questions? No, we've done quite a lot of listening. Thanks so much, Pam. We'll let you get on with your day, and
Thank
I'm
you.
sure people will be in touch. Thanks
Bye.
a lot.
Bye.
Yeah, so we've taken in a lot of information. So I think it's quite a good time to sort of have a break. We've got some food, haven't we?
Yeah, it's where you picked up your coffees earlier. Just to our online audience, I just wanted to thank you all, and for the hubs that are watching, I will get this session uploaded onto YouTube by the end of the day, so you can share it with your members that couldn't make it. But apart from that, just wanted to thank our guests for their introductions this morning.
Great, yeah, and we will be available to make appearances in regional film hub meetups, as well as Ridian will be, I'm sure, on request. So yeah, it's time for our vegan lunch. Sorry, online audience, you're not getting that. Thank you.